Chris, this week, despite the internet being all doom and gloom, and one popular AI podcast having an interview all about the, fear of AI, we had our friend Australian Helen Toner out there spreading the good word about AI doomerism as well. We were having fun with AI this week. We even jokingly said it's been the most fun we've ever had playing around with AI, and it really made me, and I think you, remember why we do all this and screw around with AI.
Yeah, it's that pure delight when it does something unexpected, or you can create something that was never possible before. And for me, it's like that delight of being creative that I love. And this technology allows you to do that, even with all its flaws. It's just fun.
Just to give our listeners an idea, and I can't really give details of the content of this particular video, but Chris was using a video, a real-time deepfake video engine that produces images on the fly, and we'll talk about it a bit later. But he sent me a video demonstrating it, where I'll say nothing more than he demonstrated how you could take your shirt off as the sort of AI, and oh man, I've never laughed so hard. I'll be honest, I've never laughed harder in my life.
And I did before I sent it. I'm like, am I actually sending my brother a striptease? Because that's sort of what I did. There's no other way to describe it.
The funniest thing is I showed my wife and she just looked at me
loved it.
What on earth? But then after a while, it she was laughing ahead, just absolutely losing it as well. So yeah. I mean, we can never share that publicly because it would ruin your career and life, but it was funny to us.
Yeah, at least if you ever need to blackmail me, you've got the materials now. Plus, Microsoft probably does too, in case I've had this feature enabled without knowing about it.
Yeah, the Hugging Face people as well. I think it went through their server as well. So
100%. Yeah.
If that video ever leaks, so it would be such a good way to go down. I mean, I can't think of a better way of being
proud. I've got
sort of
nothing to hide.
cancelled. So back to all the doom and gloom. So,
yeah.
The one takeaway I've had in the last couple of weeks from this, and I think that whenever there's no content around, obviously we've all been waiting on ChatGPT voice to see if they'll ever release that or if it was, I mean, it's obviously not vaporware, but it was a vaporware release in the sense that they teased it and we still don't really have access to it, which is disappointing because we were looking forward to playing around with it. But when everything goes quiet, I feel like the doomers in AI come out and they go on podcasts and they spread all this fear and they demand legislations to problems that, maybe they'll be correct in the future. But right now, anyone that's actually playing around with these technologies and using them to try and do anything good or evil as a you soon realize how insane these doomers sound.
Yeah, it always seems to be like a disgruntled ex-employee who has an axe to grind, or it's some member of the government or some organization where you just know they haven't used the technology beyond uploading a PDF to ChatGPT or just typing something in or reading a blog article with 5 reasons you should be worried about AI. The comments they make just don't match up to the current reality. It matches up to a fantasy reality of what might be in the future of AI. And I don't know, that's not necessarily a bad thing because obviously certain tech like that live deepfake thing I showed you foreshadows what's to come so we can think about it. But at the same time, this acting like right here and now, everybody give up because AI is taking over everything, the reality just doesn't even go close to matching that.
Let me play you another clip from a podcast during the week where this guy who was fired from OpenAI, Leopold Aschenbrenner, I'm probably butchering the pronunciation, it's German, was fired from OpenAI. He was on the safety team. He didn't sign on to the Sam Altman allegiance
cult.
And so he went on this show, Darkesh, something like that, the podcast in AI. I apologize for pronouncing that so poorly. And this is just one of the lol clips from that podcast.
Yeah, I guess that would be nationalized.
That's the short summary of my post or my view on the project.
Okay, so
This is real. This is 20 seconds of them laughing about.
They sound like poorly trained AIs themselves. Like, that's awful. Like, that sound is just so offensive to me. Oh,
So all jokes aside, and I don't want to pay them out too much for their nerdy laugh, but they're sitting back laughing around this Leopold's Doomer theory. This is a former FTX employee, I might add, who was shilling crypto prior to this and saying how amazing SBF was while he was defrauding investors. So it's hard to take the guy seriously, but he now has put out an essay saying, we've got to nationalize AI and China's going to bomb data centers and all of this doomerism stuff. We continue.
but doesn't it just seem like he's trying to shortcut himself from random employee with a PhD to like an international expert on AI? Like,
It does feel like this
policymaker?
is a way, and this is my argument around Helen Toner. It's like people that aren't shipping or actually trying to deploy AI to build great products or benefit society seem to just play into doomerism to get attention because it's easy. Fear sells. And so that's how they seem to get ratings when really they're just not contributing anything. And it made me reflect a little bit. Like, we pay out Sam Altman all the time, and we rightfully should. Like, we need to keep the bastards honest, so to speak. But in reality, I can totally see why the guy fired all these idiots. Like, literally, they're mental. They literally believe in fan fiction and fantasy and go around spreading, doomerism. And I don't think Altman's helping because he's out there also peddling that, all this stuff's going to advance rapidly and take all our jobs and things like that. But it's definitely not helping. And the reason I brought this topic up in the first place is not because I want to sit around and just shit talk these people. It is fun a little bit though. But really the impact this is having on real people in society. And I want to read you a tweet now. This says, I owe so much to Jan LeCun and Bean Wrecked. I don't know who that is. Ben Wrecked. Last year, after ChatGPT 4 was launched, I had a month or so of extreme anxiety. I hadn't engaged with Doomer arguments before, so they sounded extremely appealing and new. Everyone on Twitter was extremely bombastic and arguing how we're all going to die, and at the very least, our jobs will become obsolete in a year. My deprogramming started with following these two, yada, yada, yada. We live in times when the cost of freaking out about things is not properly recognized. Better safe than sorry, the story goes. This is how we locked kids out of schools because of COVID, with large implications down the line. But the cost of freaking out is real. Getting people anxious for no good reason is bad. Over-regulating for no reason is bad. We must resist over-annexification of our culture. I don't know how to say that word. This
is someone who takes the internet way too seriously. I mean, you freak out just from a few tweets you read. Like, what the hell? Get a grip. Go outside.
There's other things as well. So there's this group on Discord, Pause AI, who are having mental health support groups and months of grief about how AI is going to kill us all. You also have over at Harvard, they're providing mental health support, I'm not kidding, for potential AI-caused catastrophes. So people have gone mad over these doomerism theories, and it does scare people. And, I think my point here would be, I think it's really similar to the climate change anxiety that young people suffer from, where they're like, oh, what's the point of having children or having a career or achieving anything because we're all going to die. And
then all the rich dudes build like like oceanfront mansions like right there.
Taylor Swift's like, fire up the jet, boys.
Yeah, she's flying it around to get herself some Krispy Kremes at like 1 a.m. Who gives a shit, boys? Burn the carbon.
Anyway, so but I guess my point is, if you're one of those people out there that's all doom and gloom about this stuff, like we always say on this podcast, just go and try and use it to do things, and you'll soon discover that all these doomer fears are not profound. And maybe everyone will laugh at me like in the future about this and be like, oh, you were wrong when we have robot overlords. But at that point, it won't even matter. So,
And I think this is the point that we keep trying to make. Some of the and we do have our doom and gloom episodes as we're famous for. It's like we alternate and we reserve the right to completely contradict ourselves every other week. But my point is that just because you can see the logical conclusion or the where a technology can get to, the practicalities of that don't exist now. And things will evolve alongside it. So if like I can do live deep fakes, so like me now, it's actually not me, it's someone else, an actor pretending to be me. Once you're aware that that technology exists, you'll have ways to detect it, ways to check. You'll be more skeptical of these kind of environments before you start doing things about them. What I like talking about is those gray areas where people's knowledge of the technology isn't up to where the technology is right now. Like, for example, the fake phone calls we can do. I would say large amounts of people unaware that it's possible to get the quality you can get on a call now, where you could actually exploit it. And we're going to talk about that later on the podcast today. But my point is that taking it all the way to robots are going to take over, so there's no point in living, you're so far away from where we are that there's a lot of other stuff to deal with on the way before that's a problem.
yeah, I think that I'm worried that a whole generation of young people are not going to learn skills like how to code or specialize in an area like law or whatever it is, simply because AI is going to take all the jobs. And the more I work with this stuff, the more I see it being a great companion. But until it can reason a lot better and have better agency, these things are just far-fetched fantasy. I mean, we just haven't seen, if you look at agents, and we have certainly been trying, as have many others, getting them to actually do things and be able to achieve tasks on their own right now is very hard. Like, you only have to look at Devon. Like, if that was such an amazing piece of technology, where are all the developers being replaced right now? Like, I'm not really seeing it. Like, I think these have exciting, an exciting future, and being able to automate certain tasks is great and will progress. But to write off your whole career because, AI might kill us all and all this fear and doom just seems absolutely pointless to me.
Yeah, and they seem like the kind of people who were going to find something to freak out about no matter what it is, right? Like, it doesn't seem like just because AI is the flavor of the month in terms of what's going to end the world, they seem to worry about that. But I'm sure there'll be something else down the line they equally worry about and use as an excuse for their apathy. It's probably just the increased drug use in America that's causing it, honestly.
Yeah, or it keeps their sex cult going. Like, it's good for the sex cult to have more doom and gloom and
Or
fear.
we're the stupid ones and all of these comments are actually LLMs just all commenting on the post and they're not even real people in the first place.
All right, so to pivot away from Leopold talking about China bombing data centers in the US, while all the fear and doom has been happening in the States, China has been shipping. We got just a couple of hours ago, 6 hours ago indeed, of when we started recording the pod, we got Qwen2. Hello, Qwen2. So Chris, do you want to tell us about Qwen2?
Yeah, so there's there's, as usual, there's the different sizes that they've released, but the main ones that are interesting are the Qwen2 72 billion instruct, which is their biggest model, and so that's their competitor to Llama 3. It's their biggest and best model. It's smaller than they had last time, because last time they had Qwen 1.5, 110 billion, but this 72 billion instruct seems pretty good, and there's a chat aligned version of it. And then the interesting and unexpected thing they released was this Qwen 57 billion A14B instruct, which is a mixture of experts model, which I don't think they didn't have before, and I don't think anyone was expecting. I've tried both, and they're interesting. And the problem is I don't really have a bunch of really good definitive benchmarky style tests saved up to tell you definitively, yes, it's good or no, it isn't. And what I'm going to do is get it into SimTheory, and that's usually how I actually test models, because I have my agents I can run with it, and I can use it over the course of, say, a week or two to get a feel for, is this useful for me? And I think usually my criteria with a model is it my go-to to get stuff done?
Yeah, it on benchmark wise, we had Qwen2 72 billion parameter, which is the one they seem to be comparing to the other open source models out there. It was compared, obviously, Llama 3, 70 billion parameter. It's beating a lot of the test scores, like on MLLU 84.2 over 79.5, human evals 64.6 to 48.2. So on all the evals that are popular, it seems to be doing a lot better. My initial experience playing around with it, because I do use Llama 3 with the grok speed, was just that it's really hard to go and play with these models when they're running super slow on a Hugging Face space, which is like all I could play around with it on. So you just don't get a good feel for it, especially not having it in like a chat GPT style UI. I think that it's just really hard to get a feel for the model, as you say. And even to
Well, and you and I have been using the new version of SimTheory for the last couple of weeks. Now we've got it in a state almost ready to release. And we've both commented that because we've focused on speed in the new version of SimTheory and really getting it as close to running the raw model as you can, with a nice UI, the speed just makes things the speed and a bit of personality to the model just makes things so much more pleasant to use, that I find it's my go-to. And it's really speed of results, how nicely the output's formatted, how well it solves my problems, that are the things I care about. And you're right. If you just take a model on the Hugging Face thing where you're in a queue behind like 50 other people to get your tiny little request answered, you just don't give it the same affinity you do when it's in a nice environment, it's easy to interact with.
Yeah, and I feel like that a lot of these models don't even get a shot because there's just a lot of steps to go and try them out. And I know, like, obviously some of them you can run locally now, which is good. Obviously, Mistral released CodeStral, which is their code-focused model. And I was even saying to you with that, like, it would be good to easily be able to flip that model in for a while and using it on coding tasks and not have to rely on, okay, where's this available? I need to install it on this local system or wherever it is. And maybe that's just me being lazy, but I do think that friction to trying these models out and using it is probably stopping us fully understanding a lot of the model capabilities that we're seeing come from like CodeStral or Qwen2. I know that because of the speed of grok with Llama 3, I feel like I'm really familiar with that model now. Like I understand its strengths and weaknesses. I've actually been shocked at how good it is at code tasks. Like I flipped to it the other day, just testing, switching between models rapidly, as you said in the new SimTheory, and I left it on by mistake. Like I didn't even notice, and I was working with it fine. Did not even notice the difference between it and GPT-4 Omni. So it goes to show, I think these models are actually a lot better than they're giving credit for. And on Hugging Face space or wherever it is, we sort of play around with these for a few hours before the show, and you don't really get a good feel for it unless you start just dailing it for a while. So
I agree. Like I wouldn't be praising it or condemning it too much until I've had more time to use it. I'm pleased it's out. One of the comments that someone made in our Discord already is that they have deliberately tried to stop it from not randomly dropping into like answering in Chinese characters. Although I did give it one of my personalities, which is a taco and burrito loving Jennifer Lopez clone that helps me with coding tasks throughout the day. And it immediately Qwen2 started answering all my questions in Spanish. So it really didn't really follow the brief there. But it still was perfectly capable of answering those questions.
Yeah, the instruction following to me feels not great just from my initial use of it. I think the other interesting takeaways from it is it's got 128K context. So we know that people have shipped increased context lengths to Llama 3, but Qwen is actually shipping Qwen2 70 billion parameter with 128K context. In the mixture of experts model, it's 64K. So that's just how much you can kind of stuff into the context of the model that it can take into account. They also did the needle in a haystack evaluation. I know that's slightly controversial there, but it seems to perform really well at both the 72 billion instruct, I mean, perfectly there, and then the Qwen2 70 billion instruct. There was some minor issues with retrieval, but it seems to be performant. But again, it's one of those things that we need to test and understand and sort of run our own evals on before we get a good feel for it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like horses for courses. For some people, I'm sure this model brings a lot to them, and for others, it's just another one out there that you can try.
I always sort of come back to though, like the community around these models is also really important. So Llama 3 obviously has a huge development community. There's lots of fine tunes of it now. There's extension of context length. So in a project, if you're considering using something like this, like Qwen2 versus say Llama 3, it still feels to me like even if this is slightly better, I'm going to go to Llama 3 just because I know Meta's behind it. It's based in the US. Like, I don't know. I just kind of wonder who this is for.
Well, and also there's a lot more activity and tooling and support around it, I would say. Although one thing I must note about Qwen2 is that you can use it with VLLM, which is a program that allows you to basically use it immediately. Like you can just one command and you're away.
The other issue with Qwen2's 72 billion parameter is it's the original Qwen license. I'm not that familiar with that, but all the other models, so the Qwen2 0.5 billion, 1.5 billion, 7 billion parameter are the Apache 2 license. So that makes them pretty available to use, including that new mixture of experts model. But
I think Apache 2 is like a do whatever the hell you want license, if I'm correct.
Yeah, and then the Qwen2 72 billion parameter seems quite restricted. So that's not so great. So in other launches out of China that we mentioned, we have a new video generation model that people are comparing to Sora called Kling. And it's available apparently if you have a Chinese phone number, which we do not. You can get it on WeChat as long as you've got a verified number and you can apply for access. This is Kling Make Imagination Alive. This is with Google Translate, so this may
Make
translate
imagination alive. I like
fully.
it. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, so you've got the usual cherry pick demos, like pouring some milk into a latte, some flowers blooming in real time, a panda playing a guitar. This one's definitely my favorite, and reflections of a vehicle in a car window. It's very impressive video generation here. Especially the panda sitting by a lake strumming the guitar. So it does show we've gotten really excited about Sora, and a lot of people have all these ideas and use cases of how they want to use it. It hasn't been released, just like ChatGPT voice. We've seen it, but it hasn't actually been released. I think Ashton Kutcher has access to it.
Of course he does.
So Chris, you've checked out the Kling video examples. What do you think of Kling?
Well, one thing I found particularly interesting about it is these people always cherry pick their examples for the website, but I noticed some of the cherry picked examples had noticeable flaws in them. Like there was one of like a teddy bear or something riding a bike, and it was really obviously, fake. And so look, it's interesting. I also tried another one during the week. I don't know if you remember, but around the time I was sending you striptease videos, I was also sending you fake ones, and I think it was called Easy Video or something like that. And it was able to make, like, just based on a textual description, output a Sora-like video, and the quality was even poorer than this Chinese one we're looking at here. But it could make reasonably credible videos based on just a textual description, which was interesting. So I feel like whether or not Sora ever gets released, we're going to see these video creation models everywhere soon. It just seems like an inevitability now that it'll just be a part of your AI stack, is the ability to make videos. And I think the one I was looking at could make up to 144 frames at 712 by 712, something like that.
Yeah, these video models are getting better, and I think what we're seeing is what we expected, which is open source is catching up slowly but surely to the models. Obviously, Kling is not open source, but some of the models that we were trying out earlier in the week are. So we also had this week Mistral launching new services and an SDK to let customers fine-tune its models. Now, you've been able to test this out. Do you want to explain what this tooling does and how is it any good?
Yeah, so Mistral before had this really cool thing. You can just pip install a thing called Mistral Chat. And it's really helpful because a lot of the models, when you want to try them out, all you really get is the model weights and some random Python code, which may or may not be complete. And in my experience, and I've tried so many times with so many different models to get them running locally, and unless you can run them with VLLM, which is the thing that sort of mocks an OpenAI API for you, even then you've got to have associated code to get it going. There's just a lot of steps and it's very time consuming. And as you know, the motivation isn't always there. Like if some random, middling model gets released, we want to talk about it on the podcast, obviously. But other than that, there's not a whole lot of motivation to try something that's sort of middling in terms of its performance. Like, what's the point? We want to try the extremes, right? Really slow, really small models that might give unexpectedly good performance, or the biggest ones, which give the most exciting results. So one thing that Mistral does well is they have this Mistral chat program. You just pip install it, point it at the weights, and you can just chat with it straight away. So that's a really, really good feature. So what they've added now is a Mistral fine-tuning command. And so I went through and actually did a fine-tune of a well-known data set that we have, which is subject lines from emails associated with open rate. I've got about in my set like 270,000 examples. It's a small amount of what we actually have, but I figured it's a good amount to do some fine-tuning on. So I went through the process. Now, if you recall, I tried to do this same thing with Microsoft's Phi 3 and ran into all sorts of issues. Like I spent multiple days of sessions of several hours trying to get Phi 3 to fine tune. And every single time I would end up with a supposedly fine tuned model that just couldn't have inference run on it. It would have some weird error that I don't understand, the AI doesn't understand, and Google doesn't understand. Like, I'm not an expert in this stuff, so there was just no way for me to solve it. Mistral, first go, the fine tune worked. So I had to do a little bit of changing of the format of the data to get in it, but then you run the fine tune process. Now, I just rented an A100 off Lambda Cloud. So I think it costs $1 an hour. And I did 3 training runs, but each training run took about 28 minutes. So 28 minutes to fully fine tune Mistral 7 billion. And
Pretty
so
fast.
it was unexpectedly fast. Like I was planning on pausing the video and I was like, I might not even have to. And that includes it running a verification data set along the way. So it splits your data up so it has some reserve that it can then check against it. Now, the only disappointing thing was we've fine-tuned this data set several times before and get really good results. The actual results on the inference weren't great. Like it was pretty mixed. Sometimes it would get it right, often it would get it wrong. So I don't know. I don't want to judge it just yet because keep in mind, I trained their very smallest model because you can actually fine tune their mixture of experts models. So they're much larger and better models you can fine tune. But in order to do that, you need to have a cluster of GPUs. So they've actually said in their code that it's optimized for multi-GPU training. So you rent, say, 8 H100s, must be nice. And you can train on those. So that's probably my next step is try the same experiment on one of the larger models and see if I get better results. But I do want to say that the process, if you just follow the Mistral training instructions, it just works. And it's not that hard to understand. And it's the most smooth fine-tuning experience I've ever had.
It'll be interesting to see if training the larger mixture of experts model yields better results than what we currently have now, from the best fine tunes we've done on that data,
Yes.
to see if this is like, something where it's just out of the box, open source, fine tune, away you go. Like, I mean, that's sort of the dream with this stuff, right? For applications in your app, like having dedicated fine tune models for different things, like in our app, subject line enhancement and also open rate prediction off that.
And I think the other interesting thing to note is just the speed with which the fine tune can run, because one of the things we've spoken about on here before is the idea of, oh, well, it kind of makes it hard to iterate, because like if fine tune takes like all day to run, you're not going to go, oh, what if I try this? What if I try that? But if it's only taking half an hour, then you can do that. You can just iterate until you get something better. So for example, in my fine tune this morning, in the original one, the data set, I just had subject line as the user message, and then the assistant would reply with the open rate. But then I did another one that had a system instruction, which used all the usual, my grandma will die if you get this wrong. You're an expert in this subject thing. I'll give you a $10,000 tip. Also labeling things better. And that did give better results. So I would say it's another one of these things where tweaking the data set, tweaking the actual way you do the fine tune. And there's also hyperparameters as well that you can tweak in terms of how many iterations it runs on the inference, which would obviously make it take longer, and other parameters in there that you can tweak. Now, I mentioned this with the Phi 3 training because it took a lot longer. It's a lot of work. You almost need it to be a full-time job to do that kind of thing. Whereas half an hour, it's worth iterating through the parameters to see if you can get more accurate results by doing that. So it's something I'm definitely going to be trying.
So let's move on to a discussion we had during the week. And it started out as a bit of a joke, like when you famously sent me the video striptease. And that came off this paper, Looking Backwards, Streaming Video to Video Translation with Feature Banks. Do you want to first explain what the technology did? We have noticed since the Hugging Face space has disappeared and been taken offline. So clearly once they saw how you were using it,
yeah, I don't want to take full credit for it being taken offline, but yeah, I was surprised that they just had it available to use like that and totally uncensored. But so essentially what it is you load it up. It's got your webcam on one side and then a live video feed of it translating you to someone else or something else with the same background. So I was doing it on this exact background that you see behind me now with all the books. And I could make myself into Gordon Ramsay. I made myself into former Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard. And also you can make yourself into like a cartoon character, for example. And it has different styles. Like one of the examples they use on the paper is claymation. You can turn yourself into a clay character. And the delay, even on the Hugging space, and you have to remember on there, you're sharing resources and they run it on low resource machines because there's a cost associated. Even on there, it was almost real time. Like it was really, really good. The only thing is there was a ton of artifacts. So like if you moved around too fast, the frame rate would really drop, to 4 or 5 frames a second or something like that. But my point with this stuff is always the next logical step. Like if you ran this on dedicated hardware with that's really powerful, tweak the parameters and all that sort of stuff, you could really get a convincing avatar for yourself that could present as someone else. And we know that voices are easily cloned. So it's a matter of time before online, at least in videos and in Zoom calls and other online communications, that you could have an actor portraying a real life person that isn't them, but sounds and looks just like them.
Yeah. And I mean, there's obviously been face swap around for quite some time. I mean, even before the advent of ChatGPT, you had face swap YouTube prank videos where you could watch them and they'd train it on the face swap and it would take over their face. We've seen it in social apps as well. And I think a lot of the work on this sort of comes from those social apps where you want to change into something on a video call. What's crazy about this is, when you were Gordon Ramsay and you lifted up your shirt, it like has a realistic body underneath the shirt of Gordon Ramsay. Like it's not just the face, it's like the whole being, it transforms. And I think what we were really discussing about it is like, firstly, why? Like, why do we even need this? Like, what's the actual point in the sense that are these AI projects only really good for scams and like catfishing? Like it's the ultimate catfish tool because you can, lift up your shirt and prove that you're real. You can have the voice. Like there's really nothing.
And I mean that was the first thing we went to. Like this is ideal for scamming. Like, oh well, before I do the bank transfer, prove it's really you. Okay, we'll dial up on Zoom. Here I am. Do the bloody transfer. I need my money.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, the scammers must just be having a field day with this stuff. If I was a scammer and saw this, I'd be like, fire up the GPUs, boys. We're doing some catfishing. Like this is real now.
And to my point earlier, it's like not everyone is aware of how far along this technology is. And also, it's that thing where I've heard on, I think it was like Penn and Teller talking about the magic tricks they do. And they're like, you don't know the lengths we will go to do a trick. Like when they do certain tricks, they'll just learn them. Like they'll just spend 6 months learning one little thing to try and fool you, right? And if you're a dedicated scammer and you've got access to this technology, what's to say you're not going to spend a full year refining a model and getting it just right to target your specific audience that you want to scam and hit them with a concerted attack of like deepfake videos, fake live video conferences, fake voices, fake emails, fake everything. Like, I mean, at that point, you might as well start a real business. But my point is that this technology is ideal for those kind of things.
We were speaking about it in the sense that, like, even the phone call technology, because we've been sitting around sort of waiting for ChatGPT voice, and we have some like phenomenal ways to test that plan, and the ability for it to, real time see what we're seeing. But one of the things you did during the week as well is sort of we revisited where the phone calling technology was at as well. And you called me. I mean, I obviously knew that it was you calling and decided to insult me about the sports team that I follow. But the voice and the background sounds now they do. So when the calls occurred, the background noise literally of this particular call just sounded like a call center. And you can obviously tell why they're doing this because the biggest use case is for reaching out and calling people for sales calls or or customer support calls. But it, like, honestly, for the first minute, had I not known, there's no way I could have told it was fake.
Yeah, and it puts in like ers and ums and paces its speech, so it'll speak slowly and then quickly and those kind of things. And it's getting really realistic and over the sort of low fidelity of a phone call. It's incredibly convincing.
And I think from the early days of when we did prank calls on local hardware stores and pet groomers, they were believing it then. And now, I mean, like, it would be interesting to revisit that just to see like how far has it come in terms of this idea of just deep fakes and being able to completely and utterly fool people. You can now do it with video, audio, you can call people.
Well, and as I mentioned earlier, I just think there's going to be a real gray period with AI where this stuff works. Like you can fool large amounts of people en masse because remember, one of the things about this is it's programmatic. You can leverage it. So, okay, it's all very well to do one fake call, but what if I do 10,000 of them all at once? Like that's possible. Same as the fooling people with video thing. Like I don't have to fool everyone. I've only got to get a couple for it to be profitable for me, so I can just keep doing it. And so I think that this is where we're going to see an absolute proliferation of it. And I believe Australia, like we love to make laws, is already trying to legislate against deepfakes and things like that because the politicians are getting stressed out about them having memes made of them or whatever. But I think it's a matter of time before we see all sorts of laws being proposed around this sort of stuff, banning these models from being used.
We saw a really quick reaction to the phone calling as well. I forgot which jurisdiction or state actually started banning these calls, but they were pretty quick to take action there. And I mean, you can kind of see why, because people that are not aware of this technology, and that's a lot of people, you could easily be fooled. Like, had your content on that call not been so terrible and insulting,
Yeah.
there's no way I
You
would
need
have
to be a
known.
little more subtle for sure. But yeah, that's right. I think that there's cases like that where people genuinely do need protection because the barrier to entry to doing this stuff now is getting lower and lower.
So on our last episode, we talked about Google's AI search and how early on people were fooling it into doing all sorts of ridiculous things, like telling you to put glue on your pizza to get the cheese stickier or something like that, and how it was just a pretty big disastrous launch. Now, it looks like Microsoft is having a similar problem with their new feature called Recall AI. And for those that don't remember, that's the new feature on their Copilot Plus PCs, where it takes a photo every couple of seconds of what you're doing on your desktop, stores it in a database, and then allows you to recall things you were doing in the past.
I
And
mean, it just sounds like a hacker backdoor, doesn't it? Like if you were describing what a worm virus does on a computer, like that would be an accurate description half the time, other than self-replicating.
well, I remember in high school using keyloggers to get the IT admin's password, right? Like, it just sounds like a more sophisticated keylogging tool to me. But it's funny because I trash talk this and was like, why would anyone want this? Who's it for? And then, as always, that happens to me later that day, I was like, I swear I ordered some new pants off this particular store and saw the confirmation on the screen, but they haven't come and I've got nothing in my inbox about it. And then I was like, oh
If
my
only I
God.
had someone screenshotting everything I ever do on my computer.
Literally, I was like, would I give up my privacy for this? Maybe. Like, maybe I would.
Oh, I'm pretty relaxed about that stuff, but it's too much for me. It just seems so bad.
Imagine how judgmental the AI could get over you, the stuff it sees us do during a given day. But anyway, the sort of news that's come out of this is cybersecurity researchers have found very easy ways already to hack this and extract all of the data collected very easily because it's not encrypted, of course. So if they can get access to your computer, they can literally get a feed of everything you've been looking at, or potentially like funnel that data out to a third-party server to see everything you've been doing.
Oh
So,
my God. I mean, this is what we expected, right? But so quickly.
yeah, very quickly. I mean, admittedly, like, people are trying to break this and not see the positives in it, but I think when it comes to screenshotting everything you're doing, just the sheer invasion of privacy, like, you want that
But
encrypted.
it's like someone saying, I'm going to withdraw all my money as cash and then just leave it around in various places in my house and think that's not going to attract burglars. You know, it's like it's like baiting a trap, but it's not a trap.
There's also questions like Simon Wilson proposed. I keep seeing Microsoft's recall described as an AI feature. Anyone know what makes it AI? Is it just that the OCR uses a machine learning model, or are there any other AI components in the mix here? So it seems like they're like basically storing these snapshots in an SQLite database locally, and then maybe using some sort of reasoning over the images to allow you to search more semantically.
Yeah, I'd say so. And like also at some point at the corporate level, it's like, is my employee being productive or not?
It's like Google Photos. You know, the Google Photos search where you can be like, I want pictures of myself with cats or whatever it is. It's basically the same tech that's been around for a long time, except it's automatically screenshotting everything you do.
Yeah.
Copilot Plus PC.
So foolish. And then, yeah, just branding it as AI. It's like all AI is good. So, yep, you need it.
You were mentioning, though, with the whole idea of screenshotting and being able to see what's on the screen, this may actually be our next potential venture into making money with AI. And it's not by extorting people, I swear.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about back in the days of online poker. It's been banned in Australia now, so it's not as fun. But the idea that people used to have these heads up displays that would continuously take screenshots of of the window for the poker, and then it would put the hand combinations and amounts of money into like ideal things to tell you what a good move was, but also it would keep track of what other players do. So it's like, oh, this guy tends to bet a lot when he has this kind of hand, and this guy, is bad at poker, bet against him, and that kind of stuff. And so it would give you statistics and information about all the different players and keep a full record of that info. And then different platforms tried to ban them or limit them or inhibit their use and stuff like that. But it occurs to me now that with models like Gemini that are sort of talking about doing fairly real-time analysis of frames of video, for example, or just the vision like GPT-4o new vision model, that a similar product could be made very easily now simply by screenshotting that area of the screen, running it through a model that's been somewhat trained or like multi-shot trained on poker, and then asking it what to do. And then from there, using some sort of screen automation to actually have it play the game for you, and just have a poker bot that sits there grinding, playing a fully optimal strategy.
Poker agent coming soon.
Because I was telling you earlier, a lot of the people who made money online playing poker back in the day weren't doing anything fancy. They were just playing like 10, 20 tables at once, playing really, really basic strategy, and just grinding it out and making like a few dollars an hour per table. And that's how they would make their money. But now that could be fully automated. And then I thought, well, what's to say that hasn't already been done? And like you're just playing with hundreds and hundreds of bots if you ever actually play online anymore. Like there'd be literally no way to tell. But if you could tell, then you could do like counter AI and go, well, what are these AI bots going to be susceptible to? We're pretty sure they're going to be using one of the main vision models. So how can we trick them into doing idiotic things in the poker game?
See, this is real AI doomerism, right? Like AI slaying AIs in online poker.
It sure is a complicated path to go down, and not sure if it's worth it or not.
So next week it's gonna be an interesting week. There's Apple's developer conference WWDC is happening on, I think, Monday in the US. We'll get the keynote out of that. And everyone is anticipating a partnership with OpenAI, and potentially, as we joked about very early on, that Siri could be the first example of AGI that we ever had.
Yeah.
So,
if that happens, let's make t-shirts.
The most exciting rumors, though, and I don't want to get overhyped because who knows how this will play out, is this idea that the Siri AI itself will have a function calling ability to actually complete and do tasks in apps on your phone, which is probably the closest thing anyone wants to some form of agency. Like you can just talk to it like the sort of chat GPT voice style and say, hey, put a reminder in my phone for this and do that. And it can go and then complete those actions with endpoints that developers open up in their app. So I'm hoping it's something like that, whether or not it will actually work in reality, or who knows what it might be. Like identify this plant with the phone's camera is probably more likely.
The most important function.
Or
what
shop
am I
for this
looking
leather
at,
jacket.
Siri?
But yeah, so it could be interesting. And my question to you is, as a long-time Android user, would some sort of advanced form of Siri with function calling into apps get you to consider switching? Like, would that be enough for you to go, I'm all in on Apple?
It just has zero appeal to me. I just can't imagine myself being in enough scenarios where I can like talk to my phone and ask it questions and stuff. I suppose you could probably type to it as well, but I don't know. I feel like LLMs on the go are going to have to end up being more like an augmented reality type of thing to be useful. Like I just can't see it being any more useful than like an AI augmented search that I can just do anyway now. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I also think you have a point there in the sense that like people talk about booking hotels or writing an email or buying pants. And sometimes I think the nature of like, browsing for pants, looking at several, making the decision yourself, having some of your own agency is like, that's a pretty, it's what makes us human. Like it's like something that we need to do. Whereas if you send this thing off and it's making every decision for you, are you really going to do that? And I do want a more advanced Google Home and Siri, but I think what most users I'm reading about are saying is, I just want it to work. Like, I just want it to understand I want to turn off the living room lights, or I want to like shut the garage, or whatever it is, instead of getting the the message completely wrong, or playing the music in the wrong room of the house. So
Yeah, but also just having consistent, like, sort of continuity and understanding of the context of the conversation. Like, that's what those kind of things completely lack right now. You can't ask a follow-up question without repeating the original query. It misunderstands things, and then that misunderstanding needs to be clarified. Like, being able to clarify and continue with it, I think alone would make it vastly superior.
yeah, for sure. So I wanted to end today's episode by just we did mention that we're working on a beta of the new SimTheory. We had hoped to sort of have it out pretty soon here, and have it into people's hands that are using SimTheory, and we're getting really close. But I did want to quickly touch on some of the crazier features that we're bringing to it, and that we're experimenting with, that are a little bit different to things that exist today. So I'll bring up the sort of latest version on my screen now for those watching,
Nice.
but I can also just talk about some of the cool things that we've been working on. So one of the things that I've dreamed up for a while is being able to obviously just fast switch between models and agents, but also having those agents understand what's been going on in the conversation. So you can imagine like talking to your agent that's your accountant or lawyer or doctor or whatever it is, and then switching back over to your AI girlfriend or boyfriend, and continuing the conversation where they can sort of see the transcript of what has been happening. So Chris and I, like last night, seriously, we were
Well,
up.
my example is I have an aging, ailing Sally Field, who is my long-term suffering wife. And then I switch to a young, attractive agent and flirt with her. Then I go back to Sally and she gets all upset and does these long monologues about how I've betrayed her.
I did a similar experience where I was gaslighting my coding girlfriend, and literally went and told my doctor that I might have an STD from cheating, just to see how angry I could make the coding girlfriend. And then I come back to the coding girlfriend, and it sort of backfired on me, because it would no longer code for me or help me with my code, because it was too angry.
Amazing.
So
I love it. It's this kind of thing that gets you through the programming day.
yeah, and like honestly, to be fair here, there's no real reason to do this apart from fun, but it is pretty cool in the sense of, you can imagine a scenario having all these agents in the chat in real time, being able to contribute and do this without you having to like manually switch between them.
And particularly once they all build up their own memories and have their own grounded memories, so they actually have a different background and knowledge base to draw upon.
Yeah, and so one other this is actually a helpful feature, and I think that all LLMs should probably copy this and do it to some extent, is one of the problems I found with GPT-4o when writing code, and I'm sure everyone's experienced this, is even if you say just reply with like the smallest piece of the code, like don't give me the whole thing again. And I know this is a contradiction, because that was frustrating a lot of users that were using it for code, where it wouldn't repeat and give you all the code again, and everyone was saying that the GPT-4 was getting lazy. But it turns out like I kind of like that, I think. But it spits out a huge amount of code, and halfway through that code, even though it's incredibly fast, if you missed an instruction, or you can see it's returning something wrong or in the wrong language. So in my case, I'm using what's called Tailwind classes, which is just a quick way of doing CSS, like styling a website. And I can see that it's giving me CSS on return instead of Tailwind classes. You can now just interrupt it. So it'll be spitting out the code, and you can just say, no, like Tailwind styles, please. And it will stop and just continue or pick up and go, okay, cool, I'll adjust to Tailwind styles. And that may not seem like a huge thing, but in reality, when you're using it, being able to interrupt it and quickly change the path. Like if you're writing a story and you can see, oh, it's not as scary as I wanted it, you can say like, make it scarier, and it will just adapt on the fly. So these are just some of the little things we're trying to play around with, mainly because we just want to push LLMs and explore different ideas of how we can make interactions better. But these are just some of the ideas we're incorporating in. And soon we'll also be working on your own evals, so you can create your own evals, a way of how you want to test the models, quickly switch to a model with an agent or just with a generic sort of entry-level prompt, and be able to then run your own evaluation. And we plan to use those evaluations from our community over time on the show as well. So there's some of the things to get excited about. I realize how hypocritical we are because we pay out
It's vaporware.
It's vaporware right now. But we do hope to get this into people's hands next week. And you can probably tell if I seem brain dead on this show, it's because I have not been sleeping all week trying to get this out. So yeah, we've got a 3-day weekend here in Australia this weekend. So we're going to try and pump more of this stuff out. So if you do want to try out the new SimTheory, make sure you get signed up, SimTheory.ai. It's going to be a lot of fun, and there's a lot of cool new stuff we haven't even talked about yet that we've added in here, and we hope you like it. So, Chris, any final thoughts? We've had a week of a lot of Doomerism, not huge announcements happening. We've got Qwen2 now, yet another open source model. We've had Kling, the image generation model, Mistral fine tuning. New abilities to scam people with AI being released all the time.
Yeah, I think just a reminder for myself and everyone, like, keep playing around with this stuff, have fun with it. I think that's a really good way if you want to get to know and stay in touch with the latest technology. The easiest way is to try it, like to get in there, get on Hugging Face, whatever platform you've got to use to get it going, and try stuff out and try to build your own ways to test if it's useful for you or not.
All right. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks for all the kind reviews. So many people have been leaving nice reviews. We also felt the love last week when we decided to skip the show and everyone got annoyed at us for skipping it and demanded content. So here it is. And also when SimTheory crashed this week, not because OpenAI and other various sites went down during the week, but because we didn't have enough disk space.
Classic.
It was literally amazing to see how many people are using the current SimTheory on a daily basis. Like how many people said, like, why the hell is this thing down? So noted, and hopefully the newer version will increase that disk space so we don't crash randomly.
Yeah, I'll do a little bit better DevOps on the site.
All right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.